and there's been some issues with language challenges, the Bangladesh community in particular, which we've been helping, and we have found out that there's a lot of people who are confused. So tonight is a general opportunity to share the information that we have done a lot of research and work, and Rosario Sinisi's here, and we'll follow the conversation with Rachel. So we feel we're at least help you understand how to do the assessment grievance process. There's also some people in the audience who have knowledge, and there's a board member in the audience who will be sitting at the BAR when you, Jane, you want to say, Jane will be there on May 28th and be part of one of the faces that you will see, that you will present your case to. Because now we're in the next phase. We've gone through preliminary, we've gone through tentative, and now we are in the phase the BAR. After that, there's other steps. So tonight, we're helping you, we're trying to give you some information to prepare your case. And it's very specific in how you do what you do. And go for it.
Thank you. So my name is Rachel Kappel. I am a longtime Hudson resident. I was born and raised here. Graduated from Hudson High in 1986. I have actual classmates sitting in the office, in the audience. I worked for the Hudson Family Literacy Program and Columbia Opportunities in Head Start. Got my coworkers from there. Basically, I've seen this community go through a lot of changes in the 50 years that I've been in and out, in and out. And this is a big one. This is a game changer right now. I was asked to be on Board of Assessment 6 years ago. I sat originally with, it was Phil Foreman and myself, and then later on Phil Foreman, myself, and Phil O'Staten. Phil is still on the Board of Assessment. So I'm giving you the information that I have based on my experience of what it was when we were on Board of Assessment and how I am grieving now a home that my mother owns on the 500 block of Union Street. So this is just sort of my personal and my own experience, and hopefully it'll be helpful. And Rosario's going to step in and give you a little bit more of the technical and the legal. So let's start.
Is everybody here all right?
Am I loud enough? I'll be louder.
You want to be louder?
I can be louder. Louder is easy. That's like level 2. You can go to level 2. Don't make me pull out the mother voice. So initially, in 2018, and I know you can't really see it all that well, but that was the whole point because it's my mom's personal information, you know, you don't really need to know that. But in 2018, the full market value of this house, which is 530 Union Street, and if you're not familiar with that, it's almost across from what used to be the ball field, Galvan, that area. The full market value, it is a 2-family home. We did have tenants at that time. The full market value was $294 with at 85% with a value of $250,000. Okay. Next thing you know, we get the notification, as I'm sure all of you did, and it went from 250, level 77%, market value of $324.67, but an assessed value, level of 1,000%. Suddenly this house is worth $462,000. Wow, really? How'd that happen? Did a magic fairy wave the wand and say, poof, your house is amazing? I don't know. Made no sense to us. How did the house grow $212,000? That's a great question. We're going to grieve it because something does not make sense. Does this sound familiar? Okay, that's why you're here. Then we got another one because we sent the first grievance in, as I'm sure many of you did. Sent the grievance to BAR. Here are the instructions, send your paperwork. You could either meet in person, you were either told that you could come in and meet with someone for 10 minutes, or you could email it or fax it. I emailed it and faxed it, because I know many of you probably work and don't have all the time in the world, so maybe you sent your stuff in. So it came back with, it went from $462 to $375, so they gave us an $87,000 break. Wow, $87,000, that's cool, but it's not enough. Sorry. Not accepting that, which is why we're here. Are you confused? Were you confused by the paperwork that you were sent or the process? Wow, guess what? I was Board of Assessment. So was I. I'm like, what's going on right now? What are we supposed to do? So this is what my process was. Initially, I sent it to GAR. I sent a personal letter saying, I did this, we did this, here's what's going on with the house. We had a number of serious issues. When we discovered, and I say we because it is my mother's house, she had tenants that were staying there for 14 years, and I'm going to go on a personal level. When we decided that it was time for them to leave, we discovered that they had a severe bedbug infestation, which cost us $1,600 to have just the removal. And the gentleman was very nice. If you ever hear that, if you ever have that problem, let me know. They're out of Kingston. They're wonderful. Instead of 3 treatments, they came back 6 times to make sure that the job was done correctly. He said, this is worse than anything I've ever seen in the city of Hudson.
Oh my God.
Oh, P.S., the tenants didn't tell us that. We found out from the health department.
Right.
They were also upstairs in my mother's house, which we were not aware of. So we had to strip the entire house. 2 dumpsters, and everything went. Curtains, rugs, walls, everything. My mother's bed. This is the house my mother grew up in. So to have her actually come downstairs from the top, because the tenants were downstairs, and see what it looked like was like devastating, crying. And now you want to tell me the house is worth $462,000. Good luck with that. Not to mention, next door we have, and maybe some of you have this near you, the zombie property, the uninhabited property. Someone bought it and doesn't live there. We have that next door. Someone bought the property next door in, I believe, 2004, and has never lived there, and has never done anything. Okay, so nobody mows, nobody shovels, the backyard ends up looking like a jungle, but when I've called Craig Hay, he has been compliant, and magically something gets done. Until recently, the windows became broken in the basement, and now we have cats that live there. And Animal Kind has been good and gracious in taking care of the cat issue. However, someone who will remain nameless feeds the cat every day. So the cats are still living in the basement. There are a bazillion paper plates in the basement that could be a fire hazard. And now we have a resident raccoon, which we'll get to in a second. So I included that in my letter. In addition to the fact that this house was also grieved previously in 2007. I don't know if anybody in the audience did the grievance process back in 2007. Rosario was gracious enough to assist my mother at that time, so I included information from that grievance as well. I did all the required forms, and you'll find these on the website. You'll be using these again. But just to explain, they were using pictures of the house in the original assessment from, I don't know what year. It definitely wasn't recent. They took this picture, and that's when the tenants were still there. You can see the lattice is different, the stairs are still intact. That's what the house looked like. So they were using the wrong pictures. They were using pictures that looked like this. You can't see the broken windows in the zombie house on the right. We had tenants that were at that time taking care. We had a patio. It was lovely. Sure, okay, I can see why you saw that. Except now the porch looks more like this. It clearly didn't look like what they assessed it on, nor did they come nearby like last, I don't know, they could have come in January and taken a picture, and it would look like this. Or the fact that we're living next to the zombie house, and there's my friend the raccoon, who is literally eating the food that's put out every day, who goes next door, goes in people's garbages, climbs. My mother literally opened her window one day on her back porch, and the raccoon was staring at her. Yeah. So in light of the, let's see, moose, rabid skunk, what am I missing?
Bear.
Bear, sorry, thank you. I don't need this, no offense against animals, I just don't want you living next door. You live in the woods, I live in the city of Hudson, let's just be separate. So I included this information. So if you have a situation like this going on near you, include this in your assessment. It's the truth. The assessors may not know, but this is what's going on. Is this going to be a game changer? Is it going to magically help you? Maybe, maybe not. But they're not aware of it. It's your job to make that information available to them. In addition, we have structural damage in the windows. That's what one of the bedrooms looks like on the inside. $462,000. Do you think anybody wants to live in that bedroom? I think not. That is the kitchen. That's what it looked like after we had to rip up the original floor that was put in 1964. All appliances gone, everything, because we were so worried about, because bed bugs take a long time to get rid of, and they hide in the cracks of wood. So you have to like strip everything. I can't even tell you. It was interesting, like the house was really dirty, but there was a giant pile of cleaning supplies on the kitchen table. What? I don't even understand that. That's the walkway as you came into the kitchen. Again, that's the back porch, which I grew up on. So anyway, that gives you the general idea. But I sent those pictures with my grievance because, again, the assessors are only looking at the outside of your house. If you have structural damage inside, they don't know that. You need to make them aware of that. If you have seriously things that are going on, unless you tell them, they don't know. It is your job to educate when you grieve. And again, I'm not saying it's going to change it. It's not a magic formula. It's not a magic wand. But I'm just going to tell you what you could do. So now you're thinking, what's my next step? You're going to need to complete an application again. You probably got one mailed to you if you did the assessment through BAR. They sent you a whole bunch of paperwork. Start over. You got to do that form again. If you are not representing the house yourself, make sure you get something in writing. I have to get something in writing from my mother that says I am allowed to represent her because I am not the homeowner. I'm just her daughter. Just her daughter. But, you know, whatever, here I am. Submit photos, like you just saw, inside and outside. Make sure you take pictures of everything that's going on in your house. It's important. Again, they're not going to know. Get your comparable property information. If you did the BAR, or the GAR one the first time, I believe you were sent information, a new link to go to get the comparables. Am I saying that right?
The link that's available now is only for the preliminary comparables. They didn't change anything on that link once the tentative was issued. So I'm going to go through that when I present the links, but that's the only source that you have for what may have been used as comparables for your house at this point. So you need to double check everything that you select as a comparable, potentially from that spreadsheet, against the new tentative rule to make sure the numbers haven't changed.
See, I'm Bannon, she's passe Jack, that's why we're here. So she's going to be the go-to for that. And ask for assistance. You know, we're here. If you have questions, I'll try to answer them. Rosario will try to answer them. And ask for assistance. It might be going to some of these websites, doing some research. You know, go home tonight and, I'm going to just put it out there, do your homework. This is not a magic formula. I'm not here tonight to say, poof, guess what? There's your answer, because that's, I can't. I don't know your situation. I don't know your property. I can only give you tools to do so for yourself. Step 1, obtain the form. This is where you're going to take out your camera and take the picture. Because this is the website that you're going, the website link. You want to get going on this as soon as possible. Like, if you could do it by Friday, that's probably in your best interest. Get going on your paperwork. Don't wait until grievance day.
If you will stop by an assessor's office, they will give you.
I'm sorry?
If you will stop at assessor's office, they will give you the form.
If you go to the Social Security office?
No, assessors.
Oh, the assessors. If you go directly to the assessor's office, and where is that located?
Warren Street.
City Hall, right? City Hall. So you can go right to the assessor's office and you can pick up that form there, or you can obtain it online.
And it's called an RP 524. And in the website that I'm going to show you the link for, there are links to places where you can print this out. So you don't have to go to the assessor's office. It's all on the New York State website in Albany.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
If it turns out I physically can't be here on grievance day, and people tell me that I can't be here that day, where am I sending? I know they need to get it by grievance day. Where am I sending it?
You should contact the assessor directly. Directly, like tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Hello, here's my situation.
Where do I
What would
send
you
it?
recommend?
Great.
Because in the past, the assessors would possibly meet with you one-on-one prior to grievance day. I can't guarantee that because I don't know if that's Justin's process. I know that when it was Garth, he did occasionally. I know that it was when it was Cheryl Zluga, she did. I can't speak for this assessor, but I would definitely call and find out. Question over here.
Yes, so must we submit this form prior to grievance day or on grievance day?
I would suggest prior. I really think prior is better because then you've kind of got your ducks in a row.
It says must be received by grievance day, but it doesn't say where.
To the assessor's office, I believe.
That's what I would assume, but it actually
In the
doesn't say.
past, it
anywhere.
always has been, but no, I haven't seen it printed anywhere.
Right, that's why I'm
One
trying
other
to.
thing is, no matter who you submit it to, whether you go on the 28th and submit it at the Board of Assessment Review, or if you submit it to the assessor before that, get a receipt. Type up something that says, you know, I so-and-so have received it, get it stamped and receipted so that you have something to prove. Because if they lose it and they can't find it
They're
on
like,
the
oops, we never got
28th,
that.
it should be sailed.
So I'm going to say your best bet is to submit it, call him, meet with him, and also bring a copy with you that day. Trained as a records clerk before I was admissions, I save copies of everything. It's like hoarding to a degree, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. So there's that. Step 2, this is where Rosario is really going to step in and give you a little bit more information. Find properties comparable to your own. And she's going to walk you through this process in the tax map. This is what I'm going to tell you. If you have a 2-family home, do not compare it to a 2-family home that's not the same. Now wrap your head around this. If I own a 2-family home on Allen Street, let's say the 200 block, beautiful Allen Street, historic district, don't compare it to a 2-family home over on State Street by Bliss Towers. And that's not to be degrading to anyone, but that's not comparable. It's 2 different neighborhoods. It's 2 different
Markets.
It's 2 different markets. What you can sell that home for on Allen Street, you will not sell that home for on State Street. So keep that in mind. Comparable isn't just, oh, they're both 2-family. Oh, the square footage is the same, blah, 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 blah. It's not.
Yeah. I live on Rossman Avenue at the corner of Prospect Avenue.
Is that up the hill by the
It
hospital?
goes up the hill.
Okay, towards the reservoir.
And there were 4 houses that were built by the same architect, virtually the same house. 4 of them going around the corner.
On the right side or the left?
When you're looking up Rossman, it's on the right.
Okay.
So there are arts and crafts style cottages, and there's 4 of them. Is it reasonable to say that the other 3 houses are comparable to mine because they're the same, virtually the same house?
That's a good question. What do you think? I don't
The
know.
answer is not necessarily, because if they were built in the arts and crafts era, Lord knows what modifications were made to each one since. So they may have had additions, some may be in much better condition than others. I mean, you know the most about your property. If you know a great deal about the other properties, that could be good, but you may not be able to get interior photos.
Or if you are in cahoots with your neighbors and you're all going to be willing to do it together and everybody's the same.
Yeah, that's good.
Yes, well, one of the houses is abandoned.
Oh, a zombie
It's
property.
a zombie, so I guess that's something I should bring up. Oh,
I am. I mean, like I said, I can't guarantee that that's going to be a game changer, but I am.
okay.
Who wants to live next door to that? Do you have a raccoon living in your basement? I mean,
Hopefully not.
yeah, you better check. Just saying. So, we'll get to a little bit more of that. I'll let Rosario talk to that. And more,
Question?
I'm sorry.
Would it be possibly a good suggestion to perhaps, I have a real estate friend of mine that could probably help with doing comps?
I think it's not so much, and pardon me if I have an allergy, it's not, what is it, appraisal. Is it better to get an appraisal, I think?
Well, I mean, certainly, if you have a friend who's a broker who has suggestions for comparables, that can be useful. But you really need to study each one and get all the data on it from the city website. Because, I mean, basically, all you have to work with is the city's data. And the city's data may be right and it may be wrong, but it's all you've got, and you're entitled to rely on that data when you're doing your comparables.
Because they provided that data, so they have to refer to it.
Right. So, I mean, if a broker tells you that this other house is fabulous and yours is not, then it might not be the best suggestion for a comparable. And if you go and look at the city's data and it says that your house has a grade of normal, whereas the other one has a grade of excellent, and it's been completely restored, and it's a double wide brick federal, and yours is, you know, a single lot with a 2-family frame house, then obviously it's not a comparable. So you kind of have to use your own judgment. If you get an appraiser, you know, a licensed professional appraiser to go through your house, that's a different story, because they have a very broad overview of property in Hudson, and they'll have been in and out of a lot of them. See, and a lot more than you have, and probably a lot more than the DAR has.
So I guess the best advice is get as much information as you can, and then study it, research it, and figure out what's going to be in your best interest for your specific
So how do we,
case.
is-
We'll get there. We'll get there.
I just want to give you an example of the comps that I got from the assessor's office for my house, which is a 2-family red brick townhouse, small,
What location?
on Warren Street.
Okay.
So they're all on Warren. One is abandoned, Can you believe this?
Oh,
Abandoned.
that was what the city gave you to use as a
Yes,
comp?
yes. I won't
Keep
say
going.
whose property it is,
Uh-huh.
but we all know him and his business. The second one, mine is brick, is wood, unattached, mine's attached, totally different styles. I mean, you know, not two-family, more than two-family.
What I did was I used the city comparables that they sent me and ones that I found.
I'm doing the same thing.
I would say-
I just,
Does Board of Assessment, and I'll speak for, do we really want to sit there and read through 5,000 pages? No, we don't, but in this situation, that may be the case. Phil and I spent, how many hours, Phil?
Many.
I think we spent like 8 weeks, meeting after meeting after meeting, because the
Yeah.
first time when we did it, and it just, so do know that the Board of Assessment will look at your data.
I just want to.
It will be looked at. Like I said, I can't guarantee it, but
I
more is,
want people to be aware of what they may get back, because I mean, I'm floored.
Yeah.
Floored.
yeah, sir.
I'm at 511 Warren. We already talked to, the guy's name is what, Barrett? Bartlett?
Justin.
Justin,
Whatever his name is.
yeah.
The three comparables that he gave me as to the basis of his assessment, one is at $1.2 million, one is at $895,000, and one is $1.1 million.
And you were like, wow, thanks.
His reasoning is that because all of those buildings along Warren in the business district are attached, and they're split commercial and above residential, that they are comparable.
Are you the same? Are you commercial?
Same, commercial on the ground floor, residential above.
Okay.
I said, I'm an appraiser by profession. That is not a comparable. By any stretch of the imagination, it is not a comparable. It doesn't meet even the minimum requirements of USPAC, Universal Standard Procedures and Practices of Appraisers.
Rosaria's shaking her head because this is a story.
So there is no way that I asked him, did you go into all those buildings?
Exactly.
Did you make recordings of what their condition is? Because you haven't been inside my building. You have no idea what the condition of my building is in relation to those. Explain to him that we haven't done any improvements since we first bought the building 10 years ago. We did all of the upgrades and all of the modifications at that time. It's been 10 years fallow. So use the term comparable is incorrect. It's a misnomer. And it should not be used in this regard in any sense. I don't have the ability to go into those buildings and judge as to whether or not they are comparable to me or I am comparable to them. The whole process is a sham.
I completely understand what you're saying. So that being said, the only thing you can do is show the inside of your own building.
I've done that. Sent the photographs in,
Okay?
got the return letter with a $75,000 reduction, just as you did.
Yep.
Screw that. Because if you tell somebody it's worth $1 million, and you know it's not worth $1 million, and you reduce it by $75,000, you're still going to get a monumental increase. So it is a bait and switch. Okay? It's a sham to begin with. This is an end run around the 2% cap of property taxes that the state mandates. It's obvious to anybody. It's obvious to me. It should be obvious to anybody. This whole process should be fought on a legal basis that it's illegal. I don't know why that's not being done. I don't have the means or the wherewithal to do that.
Neither do I. So the best thing I could say is here I am just trying to give you the 411. So I would agree with you, but that being said,
None of this is going to work
well, now here's the thing.
because they've inflated their assessments,
True, but
and whatever they give you back is going to be sweetness and light, and you're still going to get a monumental increase, and it's still going to be going to the general coffers of the city. We don't have bus routes, we don't have, what are they going to do, clean the snow better?
right, we could go on
Where's
for
the money
days,
going?
and I don't mean to shut you down, but I don't think there's anybody in this audience that would disagree with exactly what you're saying. However, your line of defense right here, the sword and the only gauntlet you have right now is to go before the board and grieve. You've got to at least try, because anything they knock off is going to be better than nothing.
No.
I mean,
But also, unlike with the spreadsheet that I mentioned before with the comparables for residential properties that was published on or around April 17th, GAR has never actually produced comparables for commercial properties. So, I mean, what I've been suggesting to merchants in exactly the same situation that you're in with commercial properties, whether on Warren or elsewhere, is to do an income capitalization grievance, which is like a 1.5-page form. You can fill it out from data from your 2018 tax return, and it's income versus outgo, and you'll come up with a very, very different result.
I come up with a different number, yes.
And when you get through the BAR, you have to get through the BAR to get any further. So once you get through the BAR process, then you can do an Article 7 in state court, where you may get a very different result.
So definitely sidebar with her afterwards. Peter?
I just want to reiterate what Rosaria said, that after the bar process is when the legal process really begins, and there are a number of different avenues. If anybody, I keep a little mailing list if you want to sort of start getting together to find an attorney and to do it as a group. Come see me before you leave tonight.
Somebody else had a question, I thought, in the back.
I
Yes.
had a question, I think was answered. It was, I was wondering if there was a commercial database, but I think Rosaria said
And she'll, we got links to that. I'm just trying to move along.
Thank you.
People are, sure. So there's your Board of Assessment numbers. As Linda pointed out, James in the audience, Phil Staton was on initially with me and Phil Foreman, and Tom Swope is the other member. So at least you know who, and I don't know if you're like me, but I'm a creeper. Once I know who you are, I'm going to look you up on the website, and I'm going to look up LinkedIn and Facebook, and just because I want to know when I'm going to speak to someone, who are they, where are they from, what's their knowledge, what's their background. Again, and this is my college head, do your homework, do your research. Look at it right now as this is a research paper, and you need to get an A. You can't get a D, because D is going to equal done, and that's going to get you nowhere. An F is not even acceptable right now. C is completed. You did your paperwork, you went in, and you crossed your fingers. Don't just fill out that paper and be like, here's my paper, I want less money off my taxes. Yeah, Board of Assessment is like, wow, really? Next. Do your homework. Legal questions. There's a really good link. This is the time that you're going to take out your phone and take a picture. Wow. I wish all my students were like this. This is great. Really important. And last but not least, this is another really good website that Linda and Rosaria shared with me. It's a literally step-by-step. Pretty much what I just said and did. Yes.
So just, I believe yesterday, a new link was added at the top of the homepage on kamalforhudson.com. If you look in the upper right nav bar, there's now a link that just says assessments. And if you click on assessments, it'll bring up all of this material as well.
So, I just want to say one thing.
Sure.
A lot of us worked very hard with the Common Council to try to get the mayor to address the problems that GAR had placed on our city. The Common Council worked very hard. It worked 2 times to ask the mayor to basically fire GAR for a lousy job, I'm being very blunt. The mayor vetoed it 2 times. It could have been corrected, it could have been held back and resolved in the next year. But the reality was that the Common Council voted to do this, and the mayor refused and vetoed these 2 efforts. I just want to remind you that there was a great effort on the council's part to address this assessment nightmare that we're all facing. And you're just a few of the people that our lives are being affected. And seriously, people will be in huge
Financial trouble.
financial trauma over this. And this is something that we all work very hard to do. So just want to remind you that this was an attempt to try to hold this back and put it back in the drawing board and solve it. So that's a commercial for talking about what was done, and there was a great effort, and it wasn't just, now we're here. Go
Was there
ahead.
any effort to override the veto?
Pardon me?
Was there any effort to override the veto?
Yes, the council tried, but because of the
Because of the time constraints.
yes.
um,
Kamal knows more than I do. He's on the council.
Because of the time constraints, the only way for us to override would have to wait for the next meeting, which was a month away. So basically what I proposed was the original resolution to get rid of GAR, slow this process down, and really listen to the people that live in our community. That was also vetoed as well. Once that I knew all was lost, we went right to find out how we can help everyone, and that's why we have all of this information. I've been out knocking on doors, I've been out meeting with people and trying to help with these grievances, because we need representation that's going to stand up for the people that live here and the people that are property owners. So we're going to keep moving on, and we're going to keep getting this information out, because I know there's a lot of people who couldn't be here today as well that need this information. So feel free to pass this information on, whether you vote or not. We want to just make sure that this process gets handled the right way.
And as you will see, Dan Udell is graciously videotaping, so we'll actually have this available. So if you know someone who said, wow, I really wanted to come tonight, but I couldn't make it, this presentation will be available as well.
Yeah, and there are two other council people here, Tiffany Garriga and Shersha Amizan, who worked very hard to try to hold this process back. So the council voted in the majority to do this for this community. So thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Was there any reason given for these vetoes? Does anybody?
Money.
Well, it's all about money, but I'm just trying to understand specifically.
I don't think the mayor made any, I don't know.
No, he released a press statement. It was kind of all over the place. I mean, you can look it up on the city website. And
Okay,
you
so
can
there's-
yeah, I'd rather not talk for the current mayor.
Right.
You should ask the mayor, yeah.
I thought it was
Thank you.
that ultimately it went back to the assessor. It had to be settled by him.
No,
The assessor can.
No, not at that point.
Yeah.
Excuse me. This was a great debate.
Yeah, because the roads were only preliminary, so they weren't certified yet, so there could have been something done. And we were given false information that it was too late. If you look back on one of the meetings, I believe Dan Udell has it videoed, I asked for separate representation, aside from the city legal counsel, to get more information on this. And when we got that information, it was actually too late for us to do anything.
Yeah, by the time they wanted to override the veto, it was too late, because you had to wait till the next council meeting. But there was a lot of misinformation about it. We were really working hard because it was still in the state of preliminary. And as long as it's in the preliminary state, we had an opportunity to say, stop, this was a mistake, and let's correct it next year. Just leave it as it is, correct it next year, and that was an opportunity. Even though we would have wasted $150,000, we're wasting so much money and time and energy right now from the citizens. We could be doing a lot of things that could make a difference in our city.
So, moving along, this is where I get to turn this.
Wait a second, we got one more.
Sorry.
And even with the veto, we requested at the meeting, with the presence of GAR and the assessor, and I let it be known that from my constituents and outside of the second ward, the people wanted to see GAR fired. And we addressed that, and I spoke of it in front of the mayor, and he did not address it.
So I'm going to turn it over to Rosaria at this point and just kind of be the tech assistant. And she's going to give you a little bit more information that she can share and try to help you out.
Okay, so basically, if you're tackling your grievances, you're in information search, research mode right now. A lot of what I'm just going to be clicking through quickly right now is linked to from the KamalForHudson.com website. And there's other information there too about developing your grievance and so forth. So if I go through this kind of quickly at the beginning, you'll understand, you'll be pointed to it from the other website. So first of all, when GAR published its preliminary, and I haven't heard anything to the contrary since then, and this is just for residential properties right now, they also put out this, which is residential sales with photos. Okay, so what they were saying is that you're permitted to use residential sales with photos that are shown here that were sold from January 1st, 2017 to December 31st, 2018. So if you scroll down, you start getting more information. Sorry, this is a little slow to load here.
Yeah, I believe we've had internet.
Yeah, there have been some
Internet
connections.
issues. I know you're so surprised by that.
Yeah. So in any case, this is divided up. If you look at, there's a neighborhood code under each address. So that gives you some idea, where in the city each of these are. So if you're looking for comparables, this will give you, it'll tell you if it's a 210, which is a one family, a 220, which is a two family. The neighborhood code for these that you're looking at right now is 1002. I mean, as Rachel was indicating, you have a very limited amount of time to present this information. When you've got it all winnowed down, your job is to present it in as concise and organized a fashion as possible for the BAR. Photos are always great because nobody has memorized what every property in Hudson looks like. So the more you can take advantage of this database, the better off you are. There were not all that many residential sales in that 2-year period, so it's kind of frustrating going through this and looking at what is available in terms of sales. They had said in some of the original material published that because it was a reval year, they would also accept quote-unquote assessment comparables, namely properties that have not necessarily sold recently but are very analogous to yours. Generally, when you're arguing before the Board of Assessment Review, the recent valid sales are the most persuasive. So I think you agree with that, right? I mean, you may find a wonderful assessment comparable that's on your block that's very much like your house that hasn't sold in 15 years that you know is in great condition, or at least condition that's analogous to your own. It might make sense to use that as an assessment comparable, but if humanly possible, you'd be better off arguing based on recent sales. So this is not the only one that they put out there. There's also, hang on just a second.
You want the second one?
Yeah.
The SAP?
How do I get back to that? Oh, I think it goes, oh, that's it. Yeah, okay. So in the same screen, they provided this, which is just residential valid sales, which is basically the same data, but without photographs in spreadsheet form.
Yeah, that's really fun to research.
I've found several properties on this database that are not included in the photo database, so it might make sense to look at this if you need more information. It takes time going through all of this, obviously. So there was originally another spreadsheet published, which was commercial valid sales, which has not been re-uploaded since the tentative was issued. Oh, and by the way, all this stuff here was published during the preliminary period. So as far as I know, it has not been amended since then. So if you're using this as a starting point, you really have to go to the tentative roll, which was published on May 1st, and double check all the numbers on everything that you've selected to make sure that the numbers have stayed the same, and if not, you need to use the numbers on the tentative roll in your grievance.
Where can they find that information?
We're going to get there. The link to the tentative roll is actually, hang on, here. And again, all these links are included in the information on the Kamal for Hudson website. This is the county website where they publish all the rolls. So you go down here to the 2019 tentative rolls and you click on Hudson. And there you have it. Good luck.
Told you were doing a research paper, you didn't believe me, did you?
Now, this is organized by last name of owner, but if you hit Control F or Command F, depending on your computer, it'll bring up a search screen where you can enter an address. And then you'll have to click several times because it'll bring up multiple addresses, but you'll get there eventually and you'll find the property that you're looking for.
I have a quick question along, so if we already did the previous step one and got a, token reduction,
Yeah.
should we not be submitting again the comps we came up with, or should we find new ones? Are those no good?
Well,
Try to make a better case for the ones we had submitted?
let's put it this way. I was told in my informal review that your comps were going to stay the same no matter what happened to your assessment. And I have that in writing. However, that's not what happened to me. I ended up realizing after the fact that when I looked at the sheet that I'm going to show you next, that basically all my comparables had been changed.
Oh.
So it really pays to go into, let's see if I can find it here, this little number over here.
Oh, wait, and this is a big giant screen. Imagine how this looks on a piece of paper. Get out your magnifying glass.
Now this is also searchable by Control F or Command F. And you'll start seeing some very interesting things because whereas GAR was limiting your use of comparables to the 2-year period, if you start looking at this, you realize that over here in this column you've got the subject property, and then here you've got the assessment on the tentative roll, but when you start exploring the comparables that were used for the subject property, some of them last sold in 2005. So GAR is sort of playing by a different set of rules.
Yeah.
You'll also find instances where the subject property here will be listed with its tentative valuation, and that same property will be used as a comparable for other properties at the price that it sold at in 2005. So you have to kind of take this stuff with a grain of salt and be aware, again, that this PDF file was issued on or about April 17th, which was during the preliminary period. So you can't take for gospel that these are necessarily the 4 comparables that were used for your property. They may have been used on the preliminary, and they may also, when you research them, not be anything that you want to use because you may find them, in totally different neighborhoods on the other side of town.
Well, that's the issue. The
And not
original
analogous.
comps for us were nothing in common, different number of floors, different,
Right.
nothing in common at all. I mean, crazy comps.
Yeah, well, you're not alone.
No, I know that's typical, but then, so I supplied what I felt were reasonable comps,
Yeah.
while also showing interior, things that needed work and were not comparable to houses with gut renovations,
Right.
etc. So, but going in again, one has a choice on that form, the state form.
R25.
The R20, thank you.
Yeah.
On that form, you have one choice of what you're arguing. Is it that it's unequal assessment or wrong comps? Or
Excessive. I think is the
Excessive.
next one.
excessive.
Yeah.
So does one have to pick one of those, or should one go in with all of them?
Well, it's funny, because Suzette Bowie in the Columbia County office advises pick one, and the one to pick would be excessive, which is safe. I've also
Right.
spoken to other attorneys who do this stuff for a living, who have no problem checking both,
Oh,
both unequal. But if you're gonna check unequal, then you need to have a decent argument for it.
sure.
Excessive is easy,
Okay.
and you only need to check one to get through to BAR and to fill out the RP 524 correctly. So if you want to play it safe, just check excessive.
There are 4. It's unequal, excessive, unlawful, or
Yeah.
misclassified. Are the 4.
So suppose you come up with something that you think is a potential comparable. On this same screen, you can click here on public access. And I'm assuming most of you have probably seen this. This is what's known as the ImageMate database. And you fill in, the street, number here and the street name, or you can search by tax ID number. You click search, and then it will pull up, this year, it actually has a photograph of the property, which is very useful because you used to have to run around town photographing everything. So again, all this is available, and the links are provided and they're clickable on the Canal Hudson website. So let's see. Okay, so this is what that website looks like. And it's an effort to just aggregate as much information as possible in one place whether it's for commercial grievances or residential grievances, for people who are new to this and need some help making their way through it. This is not necessarily the only way to do it. And like I said, I mean, your job is to present the information concisely and efficiently and avoid making BAR members crazy, because remember how much stuff they're looking at. So this is a tutorial that I wrote a number of years ago that's like basically updated for now. And it provides you links to the state website that gives you information about how to fill out an RP 524 form correctly. Because the first thing that's going to happen when you go into the BAR and submit the grievance, or even like before they accept it, or if you submit it to the assessor, they're going to check to make sure that the certification is signed, that the thing is made out properly. There are certain standards, you know, they're pretty low, but you have to meet them to be able to have this acceptable. So they will check. And then, you know, this is basically just one way of, you know, finding your comparables. It's very important to know, as I think Rachel has indicated, you know, what your municipality thinks you own may be very different from what you actually own. And you know your property better than anybody else, so it's your job to educate the BAR because they may not have been in there. You know, I'm sure given the photographs with the raccoon, which is my favorite, I doubt seriously anybody would pay over $400,000 for it, but whatever. So, you know, I don't really, and I don't have to read this to you if you don't know what SFLA means. It's a term of art, square feet of livable area. That's what and how an assessor measures it, which is the outside of the house, because the assessor cannot demand or force, you know, interior access. So basically, an assessor measures the outside, and you need to know what the accurate SFLA of your property is. And if you have a survey, that's a very easy way to find it out. You can just scale it out on the survey. If you need to measure it yourself, you can. I mean, I've had a lot of clients where the assessor would just like measure the footprint of, say, a two-story building, but the second story was a lot smaller. It was built like a wedding cake, and that wasn't taken into account. So you can present photographs in a survey and show, you know, that your SFLA is lower, and therefore, I mean, if you're doing a grievance where the lowest common denominator is the square feet of livable area, then you can obviously submit proof that you're over-assessed because your house is not that large. So basically, like I said, this is an attempt to walk you through, you know, as much of this stuff as possible. When you get to the commercial grievances over here, this provides you know, a couple of ways of doing an income capitalization grievance, which is very short and sweet. I mean, if you've got a 2018 tax return, that's really all you need to fill this in. There are some tutorials online for doing this, you know, slightly differently. I used to do comparables grievances for commercial properties in Hudson. Given the information, or lack of it, for commercial properties in what GAR has published, I find it impossible. I can't do it. The Columbia County Real Property Office has a database which I think is called RPS, which is fabulous, and it used to be available to anybody who wanted to do a grievance. And it had all this information on commercial and residential properties, but for commercial it was particularly valuable because it would tell you how many square feet of commercial space on the ground floor, how many upstairs, whether upstairs was office space, whether it was, you know, residential, whatever, and none of that is available to the public now. So what was published originally in the commercial comparables spreadsheet, which is no longer online, is pretty much useless in terms of doing commercial comparables. So I don't know how to do them except with the income capitalization grievance.
Or could they contact that office and say, hi, where is this information?
I tried. I pleaded with Suzette, you know, to put those two computers back where they used to be.
Well, maybe more people need to call her and ask.
Start a petition.
Just saying, Peter.
Yeah. Anyway, so this is an area that's just useful links, which includes a lot of the stuff that we just talked about. Here's, you know, where you can get an RP 524 form, the New York State instructions for filling out the RP 524 form. New York State also has instructions or suggestions for doing a grievance. There's actually an assessor's manual online that explains how an assessor collects data on your property from the exterior. They have a publication about contesting, exemptions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So all this stuff is available to you on the canalforhudson.com website under the assessment link up here. Questions? Peter?
Joy, I don't know if you can get back to the ImageMate homepage, but there's a very handy app, if you will. If you go one step deeper and finding comparables, it allows you, the user, to put in various variables for comparables, and then it will spit that.
There's a big caveat to that, and I've been
Yeah.
through this with clients as well. Both Suzette Bowie at the Columbia County Real Property Office and GAR in my informal interview made it very clear that that button is not to be used to find comparables. She said that was basically some kind of, I'm not sure, an algorithm or something. It's a search function that's incorporated into the city's database, but it has nothing to do with recent sales. And no matter how you reset the time parameters on that database, that the stuff that it pulls up is really crazy. And it's not going to be particularly impressive to BAR members, and given the fact that the Columbia County Real Property Office advised against it, I understand, I'll show people.
We can get into the weeds on this. It's there, it's on their site, as far as I'm concerned, and it turns out a very handy comparable.
Well, I went in there on March
That's
1st, Peter, and that was the first question. I'll show people exactly what you're talking about. It's very tempting, and I know a lot of people who have used it, but it tends to pull up stuff that is not included in the residential sales with photos or the residential valid sales. And if that's what people are supposed to be limited to for VAR grievances, that's not the same thing. Hang on. Let's see. How do I go back? Let's do yours.
Sure.
5:30. And if you remember, somebody posted this on Carol's blog quite a while ago, and I went on immediately and I said, don't do that because the Columbia County Real Property Office advises against it.
So as you can see, they still have the
Yeah.
old photo.
They have the old photo, but this is the button that Peter's talking about right here, okay? This comparables button is what he's talking about.
Right.
I would not advise using it. It's like, this isn't even pulling up that prior stuff now. This database has changed substantially since the preliminaries. I guess you could reset the,
Yeah, you can add all kinds of different,
yeah, well, you can run.
including sales. You can do a sales report.
This is obviously not that 2-year period that they're limiting it to, but it'll pull up something that looks like this, and then you can check boxes here, and you can run the query show selected properties, okay? But what you will find on this is not necessarily anything that is recommended by the Columbia County Real Property Office, and GAR also advised against it.
The other
When
thing
I
is-
asked Suzette Bowie why this was even available, because people would obviously be using it, she said, well, it's not that's not the comparables that you're supposed to use, that's just presenting data. And I said, well, the city is presenting data here, why would people have any idea they're not supposed to use it?
Right.
And she said, because GAR advised that only the stuff in the 2-year period in the residential valid sales of photos and the residential valid sales should be used.
And some of
So-
those right there, like ours is a 2-family, they're not all 2-family. So you're
Right.
comparing a 1-family to a 2-family, and that's what they're
a lot
saying.
of, some of this stuff, and I started out on March 1st looking at this.
Well,
and
that's-
I went in for a meeting with Suzette Bowie the following Tuesday. I started looking at this Friday, and I found so many cases where either the property class was wrong, or this stuff did not correspond with the residential valid sales files. There were so many discrepancies. I had a 2-hour meeting with her, and I said, how do I do a grievance? And she said, you don't use the comparables button, that's how.
Right.
I don't run the county or the city. I
That
cannot
would,
tell
you'd
you.
have a hard time, they'd have a hard time making that case in a court of law. I mean, it's on the page, it's obvious, we're being told to use this, so I don't want to argue the case now.
I think everybody in the room is on the same page.
Yeah.
We understand the frustration, we understand that you're here because of, why is this happening? We're just trying to provide you with as much information as possible, and just saying, do what you can.
I have a question about, I don't know, a philosophical question about comparables, I guess is the best way to put it. Comparables are always supposed to be something that's similar to your house.
Right.
But what if you find something that is in no way like your house, but it's on your street? And it's a much better house, bigger house, on bigger piece of land than your house.
And it's assessed lower than yours.
Yes. Isn't there a kind of justification for putting that in and saying, why is this house worth less than mine, which is half the size?
I've done that on occasion when it's really, really dramatic.
Yes.
On the other hand, I think, you can add that in as a sidebar, but if you're trying to get your assessment down, stuff that's analogous to your house, in the same neighborhood, with approximately the same square footage, in the same condition, is probably more persuasive to the BAR, because, you may not have been in that house, they may not have been in that house. You're limited to the city data. The city data may be wrong. So I would, throw it in, as an additional complaint, certainly. I've done that on occasion, like I said, but
Well,
I would really...
if it's so egregious that, and glaring, that...
Well, it may be egregious, but then you're talking about the relative equity of the tax roll as opposed to what your house is worth. And what you're grieving is what your house is worth. They may be very wrong about that other property, but by the same token, you can toss it in there, like I said, as an addendum, but what you really want to focus on is why your assessment should be lower, not how unfair the tax roll is, because that's another whole issue. That's an Article 78 in state court. About the equity. If you want to start arguing about the equity of the tax roll, that's not what the BAR is really about. It's about your property and how it should be properly assessed.
The BAR will not be able to answer that, is what she's saying.
A simple practical question. Am I correct in assuming that if I provided extensive documentation to GAR for this last round, the first time, that the BAR has not seen that, I could resubmit, that might still be very good documentation, or do I need to come up with more?
Well, my understanding is that Justin Maxwell is going to be representing the city at the BAR, so presumably he's going to have all the documentation that you submitted to argue the city.
So there should be additional information.
If you've got it, certainly.
One should come up with more.
Yeah,
That's my plan.
Yeah. Yes.
The primary reason for doing all of this is to bring all of the properties up to full market value, according to GAR.
Correct.
Never mind the BAR, GAR.
Yeah,
Which dictates to me how much my building is worth.
right.
If at the end of this, I'm forced to make a decision as to whether to acquiesce to it and pay these additional taxes or sell, they're dictating what the value of my property is. They're going to force people to come to that realization and sell, which means that I don't need a broker anymore because I've already been told what my property value is. Everybody who comes into town is going to know exactly what the value of the properties are. Number two, they've eliminated negotiating points for anybody to negotiate sales. Three, it's going to discourage people from coming in because, again, there is no ROI. You're paying exactly what the property is
So
at.
it's not a question of everybody knowing what it's worth. Everybody's going to know what it's assessed at and what its taxes are.
It's full market value.
But but that's kind of meaningless when nobody's going to pay it because the taxes are going to be so high, as you pointed out, that nobody's going to be able to run a business in there. But
See?
one of the major problems with the way assessments are calculated in New York State and practically everywhere is that in order to do a revaluation or to assess at all, a municipality and a state cannot acknowledge philosophically that as tax burden goes up, the value of the property goes down. That is not up for discussion. And that's one of the main problems of the whole system. There's nothing that we can do about the system.
not talking about the system, I'm talking about the basic premise of what this is, how this is coming
Well,
about.
sure, but you know and I know that if your building was assessed at 1.2 million, and somebody comes in and sees that it was assessed at 1.2 million, that doesn't mean they're gonna pay 1.2 million, or once they run the numbers.
So if my property is assessed at $1.2 million because GAR says that's its full market value, and I don't get that, I'm suing GAR.
I'm not sure how far you could get. But
It'd be worth a try, and
I've talked to
it's,
commercial
for giggles,
owners.
that's what I'll do.
Well, I've talked to commercial owners who have done income capitalization grievances in the last month and a half, and what they're telling me is my building is assessed at 1.2 million, I just filled in the income capitalization form, guess what, it's worth 200,000. So, I mean, you can take that to the BAR, they may or may not salute it, and then you go to an Article 7 in state court. Those are your choices.
Yep.
Yes.
And you're suggesting 1 year for the capitalization, just last year's figures are good enough to submit for the...
I think so. I mean, I don't do that kind of work, but usually, I mean, you're looking, the income capitalization figures that you would use would be like ongoing, regular expenses. You wouldn't include a big capital expense like a roof or something like that. Just basic income, outgo, 5% allowance for vacancy. It's very simple. And then you come up with, you usually use something like a 7% capitalization rate is about right for Hudson. And it's second grade math. You get down to the bottom of the page, you run it, and it's like, this is what a rational investor would pay for this property, given, you know, the profit that they can make on it.
Is there any point, I own 609, which is a unique building in that it shares a common hallway with 611.
609,
Yeah.
what street?
Warren Street.
Okay.
And so 611 sold for $650,000 after a year on the market about a year ago. Is there any point in filling out taking the other approach? I mean, that's the only comparable that I've sort of had in a way.
Sure, if it's like a mirror image of your property, I'm assuming one's a little more than the other in terms of space, because one has the hallway and one doesn't.
Well, no,
Or it's just actually split right down the middle.
Yeah.
Well, then that's even better. I mean, it's identical. Is it the condition pretty much the same?
Pretty much the same. I do have an extra rental unit in the back, but
Well, then you would add something for that if you wanted to use it as a comparable. That might actually work if it's one really valid share of wall comparable.
yeah, okay. Thank you.
Well, I've never done any of it before, but I've been to the assessor quite a few times and the review board. But when one goes in front of the grievance committee, being that it's made out of citizens, if I understand it correctly, is the approach very different? Are they more with open ears or are they with closed minds, like the assessor?
I'll speak to that. When you come to us, we just listen. Tell us everything you want to tell us and submit your documentation. We do not give you an answer on the spot. We say, thank you for your time, thank you for your information, we document everything, and then decision is made behind closed doors and then submitted to the assessor.
Thanks very much.
Yes.
So I bought my house about a year and a half ago, and the new assessment is what I paid for it, but within 6 months of moving in, all the pipes burst, ceilings fell in, the roof has excessive leaking, so I'm having to spend a fortune to fix it. Is that something where they're just gonna hit me because I paid for that? And I overpaid for the neighborhood as well, or is it, am I kind of screwed because I paid that, or can I argue that it wasn't, I got an inspection as well, and they said everything was fine, but it wasn't, so.
That's kind of a toss of the coin, I think.
Well, March 1st is taxable status date, right? So if your house had all that damage as of March 1st of this year, and you have photographs of it and you can document it, include all of that.
Maybe.
Maybe.
It can't hurt to include it. But no, it's not a guarantee, but you
So it's not
know.
necessarily on the actual value of the house, it's what it was paid?
Well, condition matters, and if you have the photographs and you also have, you know, repair bills and you can document what it costs to repair, repairs are not accessible.
Right.
So, I mean, if you can document all of that, or if you have not had it repaired yet and it's still in that condition, and it was on March 1st, it's worth a shot.
And what about half the appliances just stopped working, but I can't really afford to fix them because I've been fixing the house? Is that something I can bring up as well?
Yeah, I don't think I would include the appliances. I think I'd really focus on the property. Peter?
So at the, I can't recall, you've turned in your form, right, the 525 form, hopefully in advance. In past years, when there were a lot of people, they started issuing dates and times for your appearance. Do you have any idea whether that's going to happen this year? So May 28th is the official day, but I think they,
Submitted, yeah.
pardon me?
That's the deadline for submitting, but they may very well schedule you for a different date. I mean,
That's
there's
what
some
I'm
attorneys
asking.
who
So
have
second
like
question-
20
second-
of them.
That
So
information
second-
hasn't been released yet.
So the second question is all the data, right? All this information we're gathering. Is that part of the 525 package, or is it separate? Do we bring copies to the meeting and give it to the BAR members? Excuse me, let me just finish. Do we make copies of all the material
Yes.
and then bring copies for individual BAR members, so each BAR member has a copy of your form and all of your supporting documents? Is that necessary, or what do you suggest in that?
I would bring one copy just in case. I mean, if you've
But
already
for the BAR,
submitted.
does the BAR look, in my experience with the BAR, they will look at the material that you're presenting to them.
If you have submitted it prior to that and you're coming with it, I would do both. I don't think you need a copy for each person. But, they'll have, if you've already submitted it, they're gonna pull it out of the pile and be like, oh, here you are, and you may have your own. So, if you want to
prior
make a copy
means-
for each person, rock on, player, but it's not necessary.
So submitting it prior means to the assessor, is that correct? When you say submitting it prior, that means taking it to the assessor?
In the past, yes, that was the process. Is that the process now? We're not really sure.
From what I understand, people have gone to the assessor and made their complaint, and the assessor said, I'm not going to be able to change anything. Here's the paper you need to fill out and go to BAR. Has anybody else had that experience?
And then you bring all them that paperwork, and then we're waiting to see what happens.
So now you bring it to the BAR.
Bring it to the assessor's office.
And then they'll.
His experience was the assessor said, here's the RP 524, go to BAR with your problem.
Right. So it's different than what, so.
So there's
Yeah.
In the past, we would bring it to the assessor, so I don't know.
And
What?
he accepted the whole packet, and he was gonna take care of it. So the person did not go to bar or GAR or whatever. So.
When did that happen?
So,
That happened with me also. I was just there 2 days ago, and
no,
he
I
said
don't
to
think it's the same.
fill out these papers and get photos and some comps and bring it back to me.
And he said, bring it back to me.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we've got two. I would suggest cover all your bases. I would say, if he'll accept it, give it to him, and if you bring it that day with you, do both. Have both. That's the plan.
I just want to make I have one observation. These comps are based on sales in the last, since 2 years. That's what is being looked at, the sales. So I think that's been a confusion all the way around. It is what is just sold, and it's what on that is what is on that site that you are to be comparing your property to. And my experience is it's extremely limited. So do your homework.
What about sites for real estate agents, like Trulia and things like that, that have a specific price?
Not always 100%.
You know?
Most real estate agents, because I've dealt with Beth Herring, I'll just throw her name out there, and she had said, you can look at Trulia, you can look at Zillow, but those aren't, it's like, you might as well Snopes it. It's not 100%. It's a website that's designed to promote and market. It's not always 100% accurate. Just because you read it on Facebook doesn't mean it's true.
You mentioned that the condition of the property is important.
It can help. It's not a magic wand, but like Zaria just said, excuse me, if there is
So if
damage.
the property is listed in average or normal condition as opposed to good condition,
If you can prove that it is not in good condition by photos and an assessment, or I'm sorry, an appraisal, you can bring it.
I'm actually looking the other way around, because when I chatted with the assessor, weeks and weeks ago, I pointed out to him that the two other properties adjacent to me that are virtually identical, he said, well, they may be listed in average condition and yours is good condition. But since that was recorded that they were this or that, the properties have been renovated. So they're no longer in merely average condition anymore,
Yeah,
in theory.
right,
So how does one deal with that conundrum?
I don't know. The only thing I can suggest is that if you know somebody who has access to the multiple listing service and can call up the images of it at its most recent sale and a description of it, then you might be able to get interior images.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
What? You do?
Yeah, we have Phil Foreman here in the audience who's got infinite experience with this. Is there something that you would like to say, critique? Have we missed something, gotten anything wrong?
I tried that.
You have me at infinite. That's not true. I've got some experience. Well, just some thoughts on a couple things that came up, if that's helpful. The bar has oversight over the assessor and the work product of both the assessor and GAR. And the bar has quite a bit of latitude in the range of information that it can review, but basically it's obligated to review whatever you bring. So the constraints that we were talking about, with all due respect to Suzette or anyone else, I'm not saying they're not real, but if you have other sources of data or other information that makes the case that you want to make vis-a-vis your property, use that. The bar can look at anything as relates to the case you're making and is not constrained in what it can look at, except that the idea is that it's what you want to bring forward to talk about your property. In terms of persuasiveness in making your case, the bar is looking for errors in the assessment. That's their task. Errors either in information, something that the assessor didn't know, didn't understand, or got wrong about your property, or any other kind of error that impacted on the number. The strongest information typically would relate to sales data as of a year prior to the assessment, so-called fair market value, but it's also understood that if there were not a lot of transactions at that period of time that are comparable, that as a surrogate, you're going to use data such as whatever you find on MLS, whatever you find on Zillow or whatever other source, and whatever you find in terms of comparables in the sense of big deltas between your assessed number and someone else in a similar or comparable property. And then lastly, someone had raised the issue of where does all the money go? And how did this all begin, which is a fair question and really never well explained typically in this process, and certainly not by the politicians who all want to disconnect from it as quickly as they can. The taxing authorities are the Common Council, who sets the budget, and that defines about half of the property tax that's paid, and the Board of Education that sets the budget for the school system, and that's the other half, basically, of the taxes you paid. The assessor and the assessment does not define the tax roll. The tax roll, or the amount of money that has to get paid, is set by those entities, plus some money asked for by the county. And that's where the taxes begin. Whatever we do in terms of the assessment process or grieving or anything else does not change the tax burden. The money that you might save by getting your assessment lower, that money still gets collected, it simply gets collected from someone else. I don't know if the term is correct, but it's sort of a zero-sum game. Somebody has to pay it at the end of the day. Nothing will change in the taxes. If the folks in this room really want to attack the root of the issue, which is not necessarily the assessment, then they need to think about getting involved in the school board, and they need to think about getting involved in the common council, because that's where the game begins. And the third leg on this, which is another thing folks don't talk about, is close to 40% of Hudson properties fall into a category of tax exempt. So you all are paying tax, we all are paying taxes at a level that's kicked up by another 40%, because 40% are not paying taxes, and there are a range of reasons. But again, for folks in this room who are concerned about taxes per se, somebody, maybe our common council, should take on the whole issue of what defines appropriate tax exemption in Hudson, because 40% of the properties off the tax rolls is not sustainable, whatever we do in this room.
Thank you, Phil. Well said. Thank you.
Just have a quick question, well, a couple questions. One, I've never done this, but we're having an event at my home, and I know we have to do some fixing to the porch. So if we do the fixing, will that affect us? I mean, we're gonna take the pictures before going in. Are they coming physically to the home, and then they'll compare it and say, well, this isn't accurate? And the second thing is, we're on 5th and Prospect, and all the homes that would even be comparable, they were sold for big money. So we're not gonna win because they were completely renovated. So what do we do in that case? Like,
Will it affect you right now? No. Could it affect you in the future as far as repairs? Yes.
so next year it could affect us?
Maybe. I can't speak to next year, but if they will, if the next time they do an assessment, if it shows like needs repair, is repaired, because we're probably gonna have to do that with my mother's porch, yeah, I'm gonna be in that boat. You know, you're like, I have to fix the porch, so is it gonna hurt me? Maybe, but I have to fix the porch.
But in theory, repairs are not accessible unless it's a huge undertaking that involves a great deal of the property.
So if you're making it all brand new and fancy and la la la, then, but if you're repairing it because the stairs are falling apart, the boards are falling apart, it's unsafe.
Well, that's the situation.
Then take plenty of pictures so that you can defend yourself if they try to assess you for it. I mean, everybody has to replace their roof periodically.
Or stairs, or windows.
But how do I, like when my husband and I, we start this madness, how do we compare it? Because the couple homes that I even thought about, I haven't looked at them, but I know they were sold very high.
Well, in that case, I mean, if you have access to someone who can get photographs from the MLS about what those interiors looked like at the date of their last sale, and then you can compare those to photographs of your interior, that would be helpful, because it goes to the condition of your property being inferior to the condition of the ones that sold for a lot of money.
When you say MLS, let me see if I can find that. So that would be helpful.
I can actually get it.
So when she talks about MLS, we're going to do this really, really super quick. There you go. You just put your search bar. I'm going to type it in.
Why don't you bring up one of the real estate agents? Right, mostly you're gonna come up with all the realtors, so.
Oh, you know what? This is it. You're right, I was gonna say, because Beth helped me.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you know a realtor, realtors all have access to MLS.
Right. That's why I was asking earlier.
If you know a realtor, is that gonna be your friend? Yes.
Yeah.
Tammy? Yes. Yes, your realtor is your friend.